Previously on Westmore Films.
I think that Rodriguez and the other creators who worked on Season 2 of The Mandalorian succeeded in their mission of making Boba compelling again. But the thing that concerns me is whether or not it will stick. The Book of Boba Fett comes out this December, and I am cautiously optimistic that they will keep Boba's character consistent. And not just because it's a Mandalorian spin-off.
Oh, I'm gonna get you, Cad Bane, you motherfucker.
Oh, hello there! I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm a pretty big fan of Boba Fett. Not sure what gave it away, though. Maybe it was the shirt, or this Lego set I bought for myself a few Christmases ago. Or maybe it was the 40-minute video essay I put out on him last year. So, you'd think that I would love the show, right? Or at the very least enjoy it. See, here's the thing, though. Is Boba himself in the show good? Like, him as a character, is he good in it? Yes. But is the show he's in good? But to get more into that, we'd have to jump into spoilers pretty much immediately. So, you've been warned. This thing's so cool. It's got a little handle that you can whoosh it around with. You really need to do that more.
Alright, let's talk about the good stuff in this show. Unlike a lot of people, I didn't hate everything in it. I said I didn't hate everything. So, let's start off with the show's strengths. I think that on paper, the idea of the show is good. I think the idea of Boba giving up his life as a bounty hunter and founding a criminal syndicate based on its members trusting each other is really solid. I like how Fennec Shand acts as a foil who trusts Boba but doesn't think his methods will work. I like that the plot of the show is about Boba staking his claim in Jabba's old territory and having to work to keep it. Surprisingly, I like the flashbacks. A lot of people didn't seem to like them, but I think it was a good idea to show how the Boba from the original trilogy transitioned into the Boba from Season 2 of The Mandalorian. I think that the ways that the show fleshed out the Tusken Raiders as an indigenous culture was a good expansion of the ways they were fleshed out in Mando. There's actually this really good Twitter thread that I've linked in the description for anybody who's interested in reading it that goes more in depth than I can in this video. I like that Black Satan, Cad Bane, and Cobb Vanth were in this show. It is fan service that they're here, but all three of them have ties to Boba, and their inclusion helps push the story forward. I think the show did a really good job at making the Hutts and Pikes intimidating. The Pikes especially are great in the show. They feel like a legitimate threat, and they don't mess around. I love that they only give up fighting with Boba because it's too expensive to keep doing business on Tatooine, rather than having Boba actually defeat them. It's refreshing to have intimidating villains in a Star Wars story for a change. I like the gang of cyborgs, surprisingly enough. I think Boba recruiting potential rivals instead of killing them is a good indication of showing how much he's grown. But just because he's matured, he won't tolerate threats, but he only kills when he needs to. I like how he and his syndicate all wear really bright colors to show how they're a force of change on Tatooine, contrasted by how most of the villains dress in really drab outfits. Even though the finale is pretty mediocre, I like how it's Boba overcoming his enemies not by just going on a rampage and murdering them all, but by using everything he's learned throughout the course of the show. The fact that he beats Cad Bane by using what he learned from living with the Tuskens, rather than relying on his skills as a bounty hunter, is really neat. I liked that. So Boba's good in this show. Awesome! You'd think that because I was worried that Disney would potentially mess up his character for Mando, that this would be an easy 7 or 8 out of 10, right? Well, that's when the bad stuff in the show pops up. All of the problems in the show come down to a single overarching issue: the writing. And this is most evident with Boba himself. Despite liking his development as a character in the show, at the same time it feels really hollow. If anything, the show gave me a greater appreciation for those comics where Boba acts like a generic bounty hunter that I complained about in the Boba Fett video essay. It really shows how Boba's arc in the show only works if you view it as part of an expanded universe. Without prior knowledge of how Boba used to act before he changed as a person, it doesn't hit with the same punch as it should when he does become more heroic. It's like the lightspeed ram in The Last Jedi. This moment lacks the impact it should have because there's no writing backing it up. Why should I care that Purple Lady did this? I legitimately thought that she was going to be a twist villain when I first saw the movie, and the movie shows her from an antagonistic perspective for the majority of the runtime, so her sacrifice to save the Resistance has no impact. Same thing with Boba. Why should I care that the Polynesian spa guy won't abandon innocent people, or that he decided to recruit Mulan and Ganon and Cyberpunk 2077 and evil Chewbacca? It almost feels like Boba has just secretly been good this whole time, so these big impactful moments aren't as effective as they should be. There's a Screen Rant article that is actually really concise about this point, and if Screen Rant, the site that churns out pop culture nonsense articles to make a quick buck, is making a good point about why your show doesn't work, then you've really messed up. Probably the best example of bad writing in the show is the finale, when Boba and Cad Bane's final duel hinges on an unproduced episode of Clone Wars that most people have never seen, and will most likely never be fully produced by Disney. There's also the issue that the majority of the action in the show is just straight up bad. It's pretty telling that the action in the show is mostly personified by an embarrassingly slow car chase. Solo may be a Star Wars thing that I have more personal problems with, but even that got the car chase right. The Book of Boba Fett is trying to go for a more slow-paced tone, like how Mando did because of how heavily it was inspired by westerns. The problem is that when these types of stories have a more slowly paced plot, it is used to build up either a small action scene that's quick and satisfying, or a big action set piece that is really engaging. Season 1 of The Mandalorian understood this perfectly, and even though my opinion has somewhat soured on Season 2, it also does this really well. The majority of the action in the Book of Boba Fett fizzles when the show finally decides to play its hand, and outside of the train sequence in Episode 2, which is probably the best action scene in the show aside from one other scene we'll discuss later, and the finale of the show, where most of the action scenes are interesting because of how they utilize different characters' abilities to overcome the enemy. Aside from those examples, most of the action in the show is either competent but forgettable at best, and incompetent at worst. Most of the fight scenes feel so tensionless at times because of the lack of real stakes, because of how sterile the violence is. I'm not saying that I want a bloodbath in my Disney Star Wars show, but when a guy gets his throat slit and no blood comes out, you need to reconsider how you incorporate violence into the show. It feels like the action is held back by the lack of creativity from how it's utilized, and that's insane because Robert Rodriguez directed the majority of the episodes of this show. Boba's action scenes in The Mandalorian are so much better because of how well they're done. There's no blood in any of these, but the bits of armor flying off, the choreography, and his style of fighting make the fights he's a part of feel brutal, because the creators utilize their limitations effectively. Unlike in this show, where it feels they're always restrained by them. But all of the problems with the writing in this show come back to a problem that has been bothering me for a while now. A lot of you probably know what I'm talking about. That's right, it's time for Dalton to talk about fan service in Star Wars shows, again.
I clapped because I know Star Wars!
I know what that is!
Fun fact, I wasn't even planning on talking about fan service in this video. Then of course, episodes 5 and 6 happened. And I realized that, the fan service problem in Star Wars relates a lot more to this show than it does to the Bad Batch. Because honestly, what these episodes do, it makes the main complaint I was going to make in that portion of the Bad Batch video, which is just me making an unhinged rant, or at least, like, a paragraph-long complaint about, Dave Filoni retconning the events of a pretty good comic just so he could play with one of his characters in a show he's not even a part of. It makes it look like a nitpick, which it is, but it still annoyed me. I'm probably going to still make a video on the Bad Batch, but, it'll probably be after Season 2 comes out. And that way it can serve as a look of what we've gotten from that show so far. And, maybe it'll actually be on time, like this video. But yeah, back to your feature presentation. This is where the fun begins.
The Book of Boba Fett finally cemented my opinion on fan service, especially on how it's used in Star Wars. So here's my thoughts on it, and hopefully I will never have to change this again. If fan service doesn't detract from the plot, fits in with the themes of the story, and helps push the story forward, it's good. Those 3 characters we talked about earlier are perfect examples of how to utilize fan service correctly. If it derails the plot and is used as an easy way out by the creators, then it's bad. Luke in the finale of Season 2 of Mando is a perfect example of this. Instead of having the cast use their wits to defeat the Dark Troopers, the writers just have Luke do it for them. I'm not a fan of that. But you know what? As shameless as it is, that scene doesn't derail the plot of the show. The scene itself is fine, except for Luke's face, because my god, and leads to an emotional farewell between Din and Grogu. I think you can see where I'm going with this, so I'm not going to beat around the bush. Episodes 5 and 6 of the show have no reason to be in it. That doesn't mean they're bad, because in a vacuum they're really good. I like how this sets up Din for Season 3 of Mando. The action scene that starts the episode off is one of the best in the show. I like how Din is struggling to both wield the Darksaber and be a member of his clan again. I like the long shot on the Halo ring. I like that the majority of this episode is just Mando building a new ship with Princess Carolyn. I like how Luke is struggling to rebuild the Jedi Order and doesn't know if he'll be a good teacher. I like how Luke and Ahsoka present the respective characters they interact with the choice to either continue on their path for the sake of the other person or throw everything away and get back together. I love the comparisons that the show subtly draws between the Mandalorians and Jedi, and how, even though they do have some similarities, they're drastically different. I even soy-jacked when the 501st showed up, but the fact of the matter is that these episodes destroy the pacing of the show. It starts to make a lot of sense why people had issues with the pacing of the first 4 episodes once you realize that they rushed the story just so they could put 2 episodes of Season 3 of The Mandalorian into their Boba Fett ship. It feels like the show should be close to its finale by the end of episode 4, but instead we cut away to see what Din and Grogu and Luke and Ahsoka have been up to. I think that Din's inclusion in the show isn't unfounded, because of the similarities that him and Boba share, but it is a giant insult to what the show is trying to go for by cutting away from its protagonist to focus on someone who should have played a much smaller role. It feels like instead of addressing the problems that the show had while creating it, the people in charge of making the show just shoved Din and a grab bag of fan service into the show to try and cover this up. This gets even more disgusting when you realize that the Sand People, who the creators deliberately coded as indigenous people, were just casually murdered off screen with barely any focus given to them so the show could get as fast as possible to the 2 episodes that are completely unrelated to anything going on in the show. And this is without even getting into how scary Luke is in the show. Not his face. The effect has improved drastically since Disney hired someone to do a better job than they did. It's the entire concept of Luke being completely and entirely computer generated. From him being some guy with Luke's face deepfaked on, to his dialogue being reused clips of Mark Hamill from old audio stitched together into new dialogue. At least Season 2 of The Mandalorian actually had Mark Hamill be there in person. All of these problems come to a head in the finale. Not only has the show been gutted in favor of parading around familiar faces, but it's used as a way to wipe the slate clean completely for Season 3 of The Mandalorian. The weight of Din and Grogu parting ways has been completely ripped away. Everything that happened in Season 2 with Din trying to get Grogu to his people might as well be erased, because the fact that they reunite in a spin-off show, and not even the series that they're from, is insulting. It would have been bad if they had started off Season 3 of Mando by doing this, but at least it would have been in the show it was supposed to be in. I think this show is finally what caused my opinion on Dave Filoni to change. He really is the new George Lucas, but even that's an insult to George Lucas because at least the prequels were about something new and interesting. This show just pulls back the curtain completely and reveals that Filoni only really cares about spectacle instead of story, and it's pretty telling that the best shows that he's worked on are ones that come from a group of creators who all want to tell a good story, and where he is not the singular voice. Rebels is starting to make a lot of sense because it falls into the trap completely. Instead of story, it is relying on spectacle, and it's why that show feels so hollow and incomplete. I may have a soft spot for Rebels, and you know what? Even though I just badmouthed it, at least the problems there aren't as bad as the ones here. Or even with Bad Batch, which is honestly somehow worse than Rebels, but at least does not stoop as low as this one does. The problems with the show explode to the forefront when you realize that it was basically Filoni Favreau and Rodriguez working on the entire show, with barely any other creators being involved. The only higher up in this show who I can't give a backhanded compliment to is Bryce Dallas Howard, who has gotten better and better with each episode that she's directed for Star Wars. I'd much rather see a Star Wars show made by her than someone who doesn't have the balls to take risks when he's in charge of running a series. So would I recommend this show to people? No. I can't in good conscience recommend a show to people who are only going to enjoy it if they already have a comprehensive knowledge of Star Wars. When you hinge one of the biggest moments of drama in the entire show on an unproduced episode that you can only watch in parts on YouTube, you fucked up. There are a lot more things I could have talked about that I liked and disliked in this show, but me and Hayden's Entertainment Hour already made a podcast episode about this, so I'll just link it in the description. I doubt this show is going to get another season because of how mediocre it was. And if it was, Disney probably already would have announced it. But, if it does get renewed, why not take Tamora Morrison's advice and just have it be about Boba hunting down Mace? This show failed to be grounded and compelling, so why not jump the shark entirely? I would give the show a 6 or a 5.5 out of 10, but they killed Max Rebo, so I'm dropping it down to a 5. If you want to watch a good show with a lead that learns to better himself, just go watch Peacemaker on HBO Max. It's some of James Gunn's best work in the superhero genre, and it's easily better than the majority of stuff Marvel released last year. And if you want a good fantasy show that is more competently made than this one is, go check out The Legend of Vox Machina on Amazon Prime. It's violent, vulgar, and perfectly captures the tone of playing D&D with a group of friends. It is also amazingly animated. It's made by the same studio that worked on later seasons of the Venture Brothers, so you know it's going to be good.
So yeah, that's going to be it from me for a while. I'm not going to be doing as many small videos like this for a while, mainly because, I had this problem where I was trying to put out a 10 to 15 minute video every month, and, I was miserable doing it. It wasn't good for me, it wasn't good for my content. It got worse once my semester started and I was dealing with a lot heavier course load than I was used to. While trying to put out that Boba Fett video, I actually had to cancel a Christmas video I was planning on doing about the Tim Allen Santa Claus movies because, I was burnt out. I did not want to be video editing. So, doing the videos when I can put them out, I think it's a much better solution. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the next video. It's going to be like an hour of me and Hayden's Entertainment Hour talking about our favorite pieces of media from 2021. It's mostly movies and one TV show. As for me, I'm going to make some edits to the script for that Zack Snyder video before angry Star Wars fans show up and kill me for not Oh shit! They're already here!
Two angels are plucked from the heavenly sky. In an instant they're gone, in the blink of an eye. If you listen close you'll hear cherubs cry. Oh.